Hello, this is Tyler Crone with the Thundering 36. We are so delighted to have Gabe Rothstein this afternoon to share with us why he is running for Seattle Municipal Court Judge. We will ask you some questions, and now we pass the baton over to you to introduce yourself. Welcome, Gabe.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Gabe Rothstein. I'm running for Seattle Municipal Court Judge. I live on Capitol Hill in Seattle. Currently, though, I'm coming from Los Angeles where I'm visiting family. I've been an advocate for the poor and underserved for over 20 years. I've worked as a public defender since 2005. I've worked in just about every trial unit my office has. I've done misdemeanors, felonies. I was our drug court treatment attorney. I've done misdemeanor supervisor. I've been in juvenile court, and then I was the lead of juvenile court. I currently work in our civil unit, so I do trials under RCW 7109, the civil commitment statute. My trials are 3 to 4 weeks long, and they are all over the state of Washington. I also am the chair of the Character and Fitness Board for the Washington State Bar Association. I take calls after hours from Youth Access to Counsel, so children who are being questioned by law enforcement get to speak to an attorney, and I'm one of the attorneys that gets called. Um, I'm also on the board of directors of the Home and Recovery Center, which is an inpatient treatment facility, and I pro tem judge multiple times per month, mostly in King County District Court. So I think the question that most people ask is, well, why do you want to be a judge? And I feel that working as a public defender, I've learned a lot of folks come out of the system and come out of court feeling that they were not heard and that they weren't properly heard by the court. And that's something that I'd like to change. And I think that's something that we can change because they feel like that everyone who comes to the court system, I mean, we're talking about municipal court is a people's court. And so the folks that come through there deserve to be heard and they deserve to have things explained to them and so that they can understand. And I mean everyone, not just folks who can afford attorneys, but the lay folks who come in as pro se's, they too deserve to be heard by the court. So I feel like that's pretty much one of the things that I'd like to bring to the court and something that we can do to improve. And I see that I'm just at my time.
Thank you. Our first question this afternoon will be from Joanna.
Voters don't always understand the difference between the different courts and what cases they handle. What is the job of Seattle Municipal Court, King County District Court, and how do you explain the differences between courts at different levels?
Okay, well, I suppose I try to explain it as simply as, there's basically two different spheres. You have your courts of review, which are your appellate court and your Washington State Supreme Court. A lot of folks, this isn't very intuitive, but they only do reviewing legal errors. So they are not trial courts. The trial courts are courts of general jurisdiction, which are your superior court and your municipal court and your district courts. So you have your courts of review, they're only doing legal issues, your Washington appellate courts and your Supreme Court. And then you have the courts where, folks go. Um, Superior Court, I guess if you look at it almost like a pyramid with the Supreme Court on top, then your appellate courts. And then you have, as you get wider, you've got more. So you have your superior courts, which are courts of general jurisdiction. They can hear just about every type of case. Below that, you have your courts of limited jurisdiction, which is municipal courts and district courts. Seattle Municipal Court is obviously a municipal court. And as I was saying before, I see them as the people's court. That's where folks go to address their issues. They handle all misdemeanor offenses, as well as traffic tickets, parking tickets, things like that. You have a lot of folks who come in as pro se's, which means they're not represented by counsel. I also think a lot of being a judge at that level is a lot like being a public defender. You spend a lot of time talking to folks and listening to folks, but also explaining to them kind of how the law works and how it functions based on things that happen in their case. Um, I feel like a lot of my job has been talking to people and sometimes having to give them bad news. One of the things I've learned being a pro temp judge is that you're going to have to get used to disappointing people because that's a lot of what you're doing. But also, I believe part of the job is explaining to people why you're ruling the way that you're doing. And I often say, you know what? I would prefer someone to walk out of my courtroom and say, you know what? Judge Rothstein didn't rule for me, but I understood him because he took his time and explained things to me.
Thank you. Our next question is from Anita.
Most non-lawyers or folks not in contact with the court don't really know how to make a decision on how to vote for judges, and many don't vote because of that. How do you recommend voters figure out who to vote for in a judicial race? And how do we ensure the judicial races do not become de facto partisan?
I would just begin by saying this. I can't ignore that it's difficult. It really is, and I think it's always going to be. I mean, unless you're actually a lawyer or someone who's in the court system a lot, yeah, it's really hard to know who would be a good judge and who wouldn't, because you really just have a name and you don't have a lot more to go from. I do think it helps that we have a code of judicial ethics, and that does protect candidates from being partisan. I mean, obviously, I'm not allowed to discuss my political affiliations while running. So, one way that judges can avoid running afoul of that is really getting themselves out into the community. While they're running, letting people know, hey, this is who I am, this is what I'm about, this is my judicial philosophy, the things that are important to me, and this is what justice means to me, and this is what justice will look like when I'm on the bench. I think everyone wants to have the best person for the job, who can be the most fair, the most impartial. But also, I think that we need to have somebody with trial court experience, someone with experience with people, someone experience explaining legal concepts in a way that a layperson could understand. So I guess I kind of see it like that. I also think that political leanings don't affect legal decisions, and even when they shouldn't. Politics should not affect how the law interacts with facts. And in my career, I've represented a lot of people who I disagreed with and did things that I would never do and things that I disagree with. But my job was to advocate for them and to guide them through a complex system, and not just complex, but often confusing. And I do expect to do the same when I'm on the bench. So I suppose this is an incredibly difficult. It's a difficult question, but I think it's something that we in our state really strive to do better at. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much. Our next question will be from Joanna.
As artificial intelligence tools become more prevalent in legal settings, how have you observed their use in the courtroom and what standards should guide courts in balancing efficiency with risks related to bias, reliability, and fairness?
I think that is really it. Everyone loves efficiency. We absolutely love it. At the same time, there's so many downfalls when it comes to new technology and AI. We just did a CLE in my office about AI, and I'm going to break down kind of my thoughts. Start with negatives, and then we'll go to the positives. I think we all know that AI can be incredibly dangerous for lawyers. I mean, there's the lawyers who put their case into an AI chat, and it pops out a bunch of false cases. Like you have cases that aren't real and that you're using, and some lawyers have actually gotten in trouble putting that in their briefs. The problem with AI is it's only as good as what it spits out. And if it's putting out good information, great. But when it's not, the one of the toughest things is knowing how to decipher what's real and what's not. I talked to a colleague of mine the other day who's a Superior Court judge, and she said, sometimes we don't know, and it takes us hours to decipher what's going on. And she told me that one of the cases, the sites were wrong. They would use the names from one state, say from Texas, but then we're using sites from North Dakota. So it was all over the place. And to her, she goes, the biggest thing was we had to decipher what exactly is going on here. How can we figure it out? And I think it gets really dicey. You know, AI that gives you incorrect law or other tech, AI that can doctor an image or say spoof a text message so that it looks like the message is coming from person A, but it's really coming from person B. And suppose there's a no contact order or something like that, that can be really, really dangerous. And the court has to be really careful about how we look at those things. I've heard of flock cameras that give incorrect information to law enforcement and say, "Hey, this lady has a warrant," and then the cops are pulling her over. She doesn't have a warrant, and that has to be fixed. So very quickly, the positives. Technology can be amazing. I love the fact that we have video court. You can do your traffic ticket without missing a day of work. Also, AI is great for people with learning disabilities. They get the advantage of using AI to help them. And I have a story of how I've seen it work, but it looks like I'm out of time on that question.
Thank you. We'll have some looser time after we finish our last prepared question. Over to you, Anita.
Um, How do you proactively seek out furthering your knowledge and understanding of bias, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility? And how have you applied that to your work?
I'm supposing I can answer this in two separate ways. One, there's the personal. I try to stay up on current events. I read a lot. I listen to a lot of news podcasts. I have a diverse social circle and friend group. For example, a friend of mine just started her own law firm, advocating for children in particular in the school setting, children with learning disabilities and trans children. She, of course, has a child who has a learning disability, and she has a trans child. So for her, this was very personal. And if we're shifting now to my job, we frequently have trainings and CLEs that deal with implicit bias, other biases. The next one I believe is on microaggressions, which, something that for so many of us is just a non-thing, something we ignore or don't believe it exists. Yet for others, it can be really difficult and really painful to manage. And I like the fact that my office keeps us up with those things because if they didn't, sometimes it would fall to the wayside. I think much of jury selection is about uncovering bias, knowing it, understanding it, and making sure that I can get a jury that's not going to be biased against my client. And I'm well aware that many people have biases against my client, be it based on their race, their gender identity, their criminal history, or merely the fact that they're a defendant in trial at all. Um, and I know there's some people in the courtroom and even some jail staff who have biases against, say, my trans colleagues and my trans friends. And it's hard to watch. And I've seen it happen. I also have a colleague who's in a wheelchair. And when we did a trial during COVID, because everything was so spaced out, I talked to the judge and I said, look, Your Honor, we need to make sure that we have access to everyone. My colleague, I'm not going to use her name. She's going to be coming in and he immediately, the judge was on it right away. He said, yep, that makes sense to me. Let's see what we can do to make sure that this is wheelchair accessible so that she can get in here and she can be here. So, I mean, I would like to think that it's something that we should all think about and be working on. And it's something that I think something I do spend time with.
Thank you so much. That concludes our formal part of the interview and our questions that we've presented you. What I'd like to do right now, while my colleagues think about whether or not they have any follow ons, is just to give you a minute or two to close out. You had a couple of answers where you were just in the middle of them when we ran out of time. So we'll pause here to see if there's anything else around those four questions that you want to share with us before we look to see follow ups.
Oh, I had a story when I was pro temping about some of the benefits of AI. It was a gentleman. It was a handicap parking situation. He had a placard, so he was allowed to park in handicap spots. But this spot was in an apartment complex, and it was actually assigned to someone else. Like it had a specific unit number on there, but it was very low on the sign. And I look I mean I like to prepare, so I looked at the case ahead. I looked at his case ahead of time, and I wasn't seeing a lot I could do for him until he came into court and he said, "Well, I looked at I looked at Gemini. And Gemini spit out this," and he spit it, and I said, "Well, slow down. What did they tell you?" And they gave him a whack, watching a code number. I put the code number in, and lo and behold, the handicap sign has to be at least 60 inches above the ground. That's 5 feet. I looked at the gentleman from the HOA. I said, "Sir, you're not saying this was 60 inches." Not at all. I'm not saying that at all. So I basically said, "Well, in that case, this is an invalid sign, and sir, I'm going to deem that you improperly towed because of that." And this is all because of some research that he was able to do quickly through AI. So in that case, it definitely was a benefit to him.
That is a fascinating story. Thank you so much for sharing it. Let me see if my colleagues have any direct follow ups for you before we hand it back to you to share whatever you would like to share with us as we wrap up the interview. But let me see if Anita or Joanna or Amanda want to ask any more specifics. Seeing none, we'll give you a little bit of loose time here to let us know whatever else you'd like us to carry with us. We appreciate you being here, and over to you to wrap us up.
So here's kind of what I'm thinking. Some people ask, why did what else is going on here? Why you wanted to become a judge? And I can think of one or two judges that I've appeared in front of, and I guess I just got kind of a little tired of watching them, be really bad to folks. These are folks that I know worked very hard to get on the bench, But yet to watch them come out and treat every day like it's their worst day, to be cruel to counsel, to be dismissive of pro se's, maybe I just said, you know what, we can do we can do this better. And you know what? I feel like I'm the kind of person who appreciates it. Like I don't look at my pro tem work. I don't look at, being a judge as being a job. I see it as it's a calling. It should really matter to you because these people matter to you. And I think about this sometimes. I mean, the cases I've done, I've done homicide cases. I've done very serious sex cases. Now, but that doesn't mean that I don't recognize the fact that someone comes in and they're arguing their traffic ticket. That traffic ticket is the most important thing in the world to them. And I owe it to them to pay attention and to listen to them and really treat it like, hey, I get it. This is your Stalingrad. This is your big thing, and I'm here for you. And I feel like way too many times I've just seen judges come out on the bench, and it's like, really, your worst day ever again? And I just feel like there's part of me that's just like enough of that. Now, the other thing is, I come from a family of public servants. My mother was a social worker before she went into private practice as a therapist. My father was an educator in the South Bronx for many years, did that out his entire career. For us, giving back to our community was very important. When I was a teenager, I volunteered for our local ambulance squad. I was an EMT. And, even before I was, when I moved here from California, I went to school at UCLA Law. And I got here and I was studying for the bar because being barred in California is worthless in Washington, unfortunately. So I'm studying for the bar and I'm waiting tables and I volunteered at the Housing Justice Project and the Unemployment Law Project because I knew what I wanted to do was public interest. And I sort of feel like that's the same kind of thing that being on the bench is. So I've made a career of public service. I hope to continue to do that. And quite frankly, I just want to be the kind of judge that my parents would be proud of. I think that would make me incredibly happy. So I've got more time, but that's pretty much all I got.
Thank you so much. I love that refrain, being someone that your parents would be proud of. This concludes the formal part of our interview. We'll stop recording.